power, power, wonder-working power. Enrique Castro, if you can open the super prayer, please.
Amen. All right, let's turn in our Bibles. We're going to go back to the original text in 2 Chronicles 1, and we're also going to read Matthew chapter 13, and we want to continue to approach the subject of discovering your genius. And today we're going to talk about steps to releasing. We've already touched on that a little bit in the first couple of lessons, but I want to kind of get into some further substance about that. And I was thinking about the miracle of the seed. The miracle of the seed. God put this in nature. It's an astonishing, miraculous dimension of how nature functions and operates. Seeds don't evolve. They can't evolve. They had to have been made from the beginning. And I just started my Bible reading again from the beginning, from the book of Genesis. And God created in every living thing the capacity to reproduce. In plants, in the biological world, in a lot of the biological world, it's a seed. And seeds can be little, tiny, barely visible, one seed. Other seeds can be much larger. You may be able to put a dozen or so in the palm of your hand. There are some seeds that are so small, you can put 2,000 of them on the tip of your finger. I can't remember the particular plant that they're related to, but that's how small they are. God created seeds. Man can't make a seed. They're trying to clone human beings and do different things like that. There's all sorts of science and technology that can clone and reproduce on certain levels, but we can't make a seed. You can't manufacture a seed in a factory because they were created by God to function in essence in a supernatural way. My granddaughter-in-law just had their first baby, my first great-grandchild, and everybody marvels when a baby comes out of the womb knowing that it began with a single microscopic cell that split in two and then began to multiply. And over the process, of course, of 9 months, that baby grows from that single cell into a fully formed human being. It's a miracle. It really is a miracle of life, a miracle of reproduction. And of course, the idea of a seed functions in all kinds of, or rather serves as an analogy for all kinds of things. We give money. Money is a seed. We receive offerings that are like seeds. When we plant a church into a foreign country or a city here in America, we take a couple. That couple is a seed that we plant into the soil of a city. And the idea is that that seed will sprout and it will grow and it's going to bear fruit. So I want to use this idea in our examination of discovering your genius, because what I want to say here to analogize this is that the seed of genius is in us, not yet realized. It's like a seed that you have in a jar, or you go down to the garden center and you buy packets of seeds. Those seeds are fruit in potential. They're not yet realized, but all the life, all the power, all the possibilities and destiny and future is in that seed. I made the statement the other day, and I got a little bit of feedback from that, or blowback from that, but and so I did a little more reading. I made the statement that everyone's brain is essentially the same. Now, that's a generalized statement. We all have the same, basically the same body parts, although I'm not 7'2" and can't play in the NBA and I can't high jump and so forth. but we all have the same type of body parts, the same types of muscles, and everyone's brain is essentially the same. Now, there are hereditary differences in human beings. There are genetic differences. People are born with predispositions toward certain things in life. It seems like athletic ability can run in families. Father's a professional baseball player or a professional football player, and it's always amazing how very often his sons and offspring end up playing in the NFL. And so we have dispositions or predispositions that are genetically wired into our function as human beings, things that are hereditary. We have feet, we have legs, we have eyes, we have noses, we have, obviously different sizes, different shapes, but we have the same physical parts. And even though we all have hands and various muscles and our bodies are various sizes, we have different physiological capabilities. And the same is true with the brain. We all have a brain, but not everybody thinks the same way with their brain. Not everybody utilizes their brain in the same way. Not everybody stimulates and exercises. Not everybody's brain grows and develops in the same way, although it is possible for every one of your brains to develop to a dimension and a capacity beyond where it functions now. Because a brain is essentially a muscle. You've heard of muscle memory. Your muscles have the ability to remember certain movements and certain things that you do with them. Of course, our brains are much more complex than any single muscle in our body. And so we can think differently. Our brains develop differently. Some people will go to college, they'll go to university, they'll study, they'll read a lot. And so therefore their brains develop differently. Other people don't do anything like that. They don't do anything to discipline themselves or to stimulate their brain. And so the life that is in the seed, if we could look at your brain as a seed for the purposes of this lesson this morning, never bears fruit or never grows or never develops. But what I want to emphasize today is that there are things that you can do. And we've already talked about this. And the fact of the matter is that some people won't do what is necessary in order for your brain, your intellectual capacity to begin to grow, expand, and develop. It takes work, takes discipline, takes various things that we're going to examine a little bit today. And so some people just simply aren't going to do that. Now, again, all seeds are essentially the same in how they function, basically and generally, but of course they have different expression depending on opportunity and environment. My wife and I did some remodeling in our back yard, and I won't tell you the whole story, but I got inspired about building what are called garden boxes. These are boxes about a foot deep. Mine are about 5 feet by 4 feet or so, and they stand on legs just like a table. And you fill that foot depth with dirt, and you plant seeds in it. And so this, is a little bit of an easier way to garden than having to get down on your hands and knees on the ground. So I did this for my wife, and so we got them all wired up with irrigation and so forth. We bought some tomato plants and other things that were already in plant form. But I bought a bunch of seeds. And I think, man, I'm going to be a gardener. We're going to be eating out of these garden boxes. And so I planted the seeds. I don't quite know what went wrong. I'm going to have to figure that out. I planted them in the height of summer. They don't have shade, probably too much sun. Pastor Glenn had a few ideas about why I yet again failed as a farmer. You should be glad that your food table is not dependent on my farming ability, because you'd starve to death. But anyway, these seeds, I planted onions, I planted broccoli, I planted carrots, and some other things I can't even remember, and they sprouted. And I was very excited as I went out to the garden box every day and looked, and finally after a few, they sprouted, but that was about it. They grew for a couple of days to a certain height and then stopped. And they're still there. I left them there. They're still there, disappointing me, frustrating me. But those seeds had the misfortune of falling into my hands, who doesn't really know what to do with them. If I took those very same seeds and gave them to someone who knows what they're doing, is an experienced gardener, you'd have had a different result, you see. And so the same can be true with the function of your brain. It may be, the misfortune that your brain happened to get deposited in someone like you, and so it's not going to have opportunity to grow and develop. It gets deposited into somebody else, and they discover a cure for cancer, or they become some high achiever in life. So we all have a brain. That brain has potential, but in many and most, it's not going to be realized to its full possibility. And just not to be overly repetitive, but we're using that analogy or that statement that you hear from time to time, that human beings only use about 10% of their capacity, and I think that's generally true. So if it is true that we only use 10% of our capacity, that can't be God. To have 90% of possibility of the function of our intellect that God created and gave us to not be used at all, that wouldn't be God. God wouldn't give you this much and then only expect you to use this much. So these are some of the dynamics that we're talking about. So I want to read the text because we can draw from it the analogy of a seed, although it's not directly mentioned here. What we see is something deposited in Solomon that grows. So you essentially have the analogy of a seed here. So let's read the text again. On that night, this is 2 Chronicles 1:7. Yes, there it is. On that night, God appeared to Solomon and said to him, "Ask, what shall I give you?" And Solomon said to God, "You have shown great mercy to David my father, made me king. Now, O Lord, let your promise to David my father be established. You have made me a king over a people like the dust of the earth. Now give me wisdom and knowledge that I may go out and come in before this people, for who can judge this great people of yours?" And then down toward the bottom of those verses, wisdom and knowledge, God said to him, are granted you. And besides that, I'll give you riches and wealth and honor. And then let's turn to Matthew chapter 13, verse 3. And then Jesus spoke many things to them in parables, saying, "Behold, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell by wayside. Birds came and devoured them. Some fell on stony places. They did not have much earth. They immediately sprang up because they had no depth. But when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And some fell among thorns. The thorns sprang up and choked them, but others fell on good ground, and they yielded a crop. So what you have here is the same seeds. All of those seeds, if all of those seeds are put into good soil, they're all going to grow, but they don't. So if we can view human beings as the field and the brain as a seed, can we do that today? I can do it because I'm teaching today, so I'll do whatever I want. So the brain is a seed that's put into the soil of human beings. Now, how good that soil is what is determined. Some people don't utilize very much of their intellectual capacity. They just don't. They'll go through their whole life being a dunce. Other people see possibilities. I can go to school, I can read, I can learn. I don't know, but I can find out. They're incredibly curious. They have ambition. So that is a seed, as it were, that's put into good soil. And that seed is going to grow and sprout, and it's going to bear good fruit. So what I want to talk about today is the atmosphere that you contribute to. Next week, we're going to look at the atmosphere that God creates and God contributes to. But you have a lot to say and a lot to do with how the function of your brain expresses itself. You can determine, a farmer can investigate the quality of soil. He can enhance the quality of soil through water, through irrigation, planting at the right time. So the farmer has a lot to do with the environment that seed is planted into. And part of his skill is preparing the environment, isn't it? It's getting rid of the rocks, getting rid of the stumps, fertilizing the soil if necessary, determining the quality of the soil, making sure there's enough water, and so forth. So I think a lot of us, a lot of people, are gripped with a wrong mentality. We begin by thinking, I just don't have what it takes. I'm just not that smart. I wasn't made to go to college. I wasn't made to get a master's degree. My brain just doesn't work that way. And then I'm just using that for an example. Not everybody should go to college. Not everybody has to go to college. And going to college in and of itself doesn't make you smart or ensure that you're going to be smart. And it isn't true that only smart people go to college. You can I'm just simply using that as an example, and people automatically think, I'm just not that smart. I just don't have what it takes. Some of you think that you have already hit your capacity. You know, you're 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50 years old. You think that you've learned all that you're going to learn. Maybe you think you've learned all that you can learn, and you're not really looking for more. You're simply looking to do what you already know how to do. Not looking to expand or learn more or educate yourself. People think that are in their 40s or 50s, I'm past the ability to learn. That old false saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, we can think that about ourselves. I can't. That's how we begin. And this affects the quality of atmosphere of your life. And you're going to stifle the possibilities of your brain growing in intellectual capacity and possibility. I wonder how many people are saying, I can't, and because I can't, I won't. And you are squashing so much great potential and so much great possibility. Someone wrote this poem, "Can't is the father of feeble endeavor, the parent of terror and of half-hearted work. It weakens the efforts of artisans clever and makes of the toiler an indolent shirk. It poisons the soul of the man with a vision. It stifles in infancy many a plan. It greets honest toiling with open derision and mocks at the hopes and the dreams of a man. Can't is a word none should speak without blushing. To utter it should be a symbol of shame, ambition, and courage. It daily is crushing. It blights a man's purpose and shortens his aim. Despise it with all of your hatred of error. Refuse it the lodgment it seeks in your brain. Arm against it as a creature of terror. All that you can dream, all that you dream of you someday shall gain. Can't is the word that is foe to ambition. An enemy ambushed to shatter your will. Its prey is forever the man with a mission, and bows but to courage and patience and skill. Hate it. Hate it with hatred that's deep and undying. For once it is welcomed, it will break any man. Whatever the goal you are seeking, keep trying, and answer this demon by saying, I can. It's a form of negativity and unbelief. All Abraham had to say, I can't. All Peter had to say when Jesus beckoned him to come to him on the water was, I can't. It's physically impossible to walk on water, and he wouldn't have. And I wonder how many I can'ts are being spoken by us right now that is really hindering something great that God wants to accomplish outside of you or even inside of you. And how much growth and development, how much could you learn, and how far could your intellectual, mental capacity be expanded if you would just start saying, I can. So the impulse here that I'm trying to inspire you with is for you to take action. today. It's very uncomfortable to step outside the boundaries of your comfort zone. Going to school, just using this as an analogy, I'm not saying this is what you should do at the age of 40 or 45, take something, right? People get inspired. They're sick and tired of being a minimum wage earner at 35 years old. I'm going to do something. I'm going to learn. I'm going to educate. I'm going to get my brain stimulated and function. It's uncomfortable stepping outside the boundaries of our comfort zone. Some of you have been in a comfort zone way too long, and you're actually hindering what God wants to do with your life. You'd rather stay with what you're comfortable, stay with what you know, and not grow beyond that. So the impetus is to get up, get moving, and to realize that nothing is going to happen until you do. Think of the environment that God put Adam in. He created him as a genius, gave him dominion over every seed-bearing plant and over all the animals. And as he's in this atmosphere, he has to figure things out. What do I do with these seeds? How can I be productive? How can I grow food? How can I herd these animals? And if you read in Genesis chapter 4, they were already mining gold and producing copper, brass rather, which is an alloy of copper and tin. So they were mining. They didn't have any schools to go to learn how to mine. They had to figure things out as they engaged their environment and applied themselves to learning and to figuring things out. We're talking about you taking action to release your genius, getting outside the boundaries of the 10% of what you're utilizing and venturing into the realm of what you are not yet utilizing. You want increase, you want to grow, you want to better your life, you want to change your situation, you have to take action. I thought of the story of Jonathan and his armor bearer. Jonathan said to the young man who bore his armor, 1 Samuel 14:6, let us go over to the garrison of the Philistines. No one else is willing to fight. A garrison is a fortress. The Philistines are inside, they're armed. And Jonathan said, let us go up over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing restrains the Lord from saving by many or few. So he had this thought. You and I can go up against this garrison, and, in the natural, we can't win. We're going to be slaughtered. But in the supernatural, God could help us. God could intervene. And so that thought that Jonathan had that took him outside the comfort zone into an arena of incredible risk became a seed where he discovered possibilities that he didn't know before. But he had to take the risk. I could get killed, but I could live. We could get slaughtered, but we could win. And he was willing to put himself in a position to take that kind of risk. You see, that's what it takes. It's about environment. Jonathan created an environment where God could move. He did that. He made the decision. In our text, Solomon has faith to ask God for something beyond his capacity. He doesn't have it. He does have a brain. He does have an amount of intellect. He does have some measure of ability and judgment, but not enough. But his brain is a seed, and his capacity was increased when he exercised faith, didn't run from his problems, didn't run from the fearful circumstances that he was facing, and said, God, you have to help me. You can help me. And God actually deposited wisdom. His brain began to function at a greater level, because it's out of your brain that you're able to process events in life and circumstances, think things through, and draw conclusions and make judgments. And so the capacity of Solomon's brain was increased as he remained. He didn't run. He didn't say, I can't. But he remained in place. God, you have to help me. And then he engaged these two women that came to him, both claiming that they had a baby that the other one killed, or the other one, the one baby died and the one woman stole the living baby, and they were arguing about that before. And he figured out, he heard them out, brains going to work, and he came up with a solution. He wouldn't have been able to do that before. So here's a man fully grown. He's a king. He already has some ability, talent, and skill, but it's increasing. It's expanding and it's enlarging. So you have to consider your situation. What are you saying no to, or I can't, or that's impossible, that'll never happen? Jonathan could have said that. Peter could have said that. Solomon could have run from his responsibility and never sought the help of God. So I want to talk about two primary things in today's lesson. We've already covered some other things in these very briefly. But I want to talk about two dimensions that create an atmosphere where growth can occur and genius can be discovered. The first is the area of discipline. You have to focus your life into an area that you are not yet equipped for and commit yourself to venturing into that arena. You're not equipped for it. You don't have the ability. Solomon didn't have the ability. He wasn't equipped, but he ventured into that arena asking for God's help. He doesn't run. He remains in place. He's faced with challenges that are beyond him. And so part of creating an atmosphere where God can move is disciplining yourself, narrowing the boundaries of your life that is necessary if you're going to excel. You've got to narrow the bound. You can't do anything and everything. You cannot be lazy. You cannot be neglectful. What does a professional athlete do? Even the ones that are multi-millionaires, they have $100 million in the bank, and yet they control their diet. They exercise, they work out, they're not goofing off, indulging their flesh continually. They understand that if they're going to remain at a level of peak performance and even get better, they've got to discipline themselves. And that's what this generation is unwilling to do. That's what a lot of God's people are unwilling to do. If you're going to go to school, you can take general studies for a period of time. In grade school, junior high school, and high school, you take math, English, geography, different types of math, and so forth. But then when you get to college, you got to narrow yourself. You got to figure out what it is you want to spend the rest of your life doing. They call it a discipline in college. What discipline are you going to commit yourself to? Well, I want to be an engineer, or I want to be an architect, or I want to be a nurse, or whatever it is. And then you focus on that. You don't know how to be a nurse or an architect. It's going to be hard. It's complex, and you have to learn a lot. You have to read and study, but you venture into that arena, and what happens? Your brain starts getting fed and nurtured, and that seed that is your brain now begins to realize potential beyond where it has functioned thus far. You can have an incredible talent. You can have an incredible intellect. You can have an incredible ability. You can have artistic or musical skill or talent. But if you don't discipline yourself, you'll never learn. I was listening to a guitar player interviewed the other day. He was holding his guitar, and just an expert guitar player. And he was talking about how long it took him to learn that little move that guitar players have when they have their finger on the string and they move it up to get a certain sound. He said it took him months and months and months to get that down where he could play smoothly without stopping and then doing it. And he said it took me months and months of focusing on that. And now when he plays, that's just part of his repertoire. Took discipline, focus, and in the arena of that, your talent, your skill, and we're talking about here the function of your brain and your intellect can then begin to expand, and it can begin to grow, and it can begin to develop. Discipline is what enables you to win the battle over the time that it takes to learn and to develop skill and talent. It is what enables you to win the battle over setbacks and even failure. You stay disciplined. You stay focused. Tom Brady has been a quarterback for over 20 years. I think he's 42 or 43 years old. He's still functioning at peak performance. He won the Super Bowl last year. He's in the top 1, 2, or 3 quarterbacks in the NFL. It takes a high level of discipline to achieve that. He's achieved something that no one else has ever achieved before, being able to perform at the level that he does at that age. He's willing to discipline himself, and that's the reward. You grow, you develop, you're able to do things you've never done before. 1 Corinthians 9, Paul uses the imagery of athletics in these next 2 scriptures I'm going to read. Do you not know that those who run in a race run all, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. Everyone who competes for the prize is temperate. Self-controlled is what that word means, discipline. Is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. Discipline creates the atmosphere where you can excel. And that's the atmosphere that you have to contribute into your life. You all have a brain. You all have God's saving grace working in your life, incredible possibility. But if you won't discipline yourself, that'll never be realized. You'll never fulfill your calling. You'll never excel as a Christian and a believer. You'll never step out of the boat and experience what it is to walk on water. You'll never develop the wisdom of Solomon, where you can be faced with complex, seemingly impossible problems that don't seem to have a solution, and you come up with something. It's amazing. You fixate on something, think about it long enough, and you come up with a solution. Have you ever been faced with an impossible problem or something so complex you've never been down that road before, and you're thinking, man, what am I going to do? But what do? You sit around and you think about it. You ponder the matter, and your brain and your synapses and the electrodes and the wiring starts firing, and you come up with an answer. And then you've developed that, and your brain grows as a consequence of that. Philippians 3, Paul uses another sporting analogy here. Not that I have already attained or am already perfected, but I press on that I may lay hold of that which for Christ Jesus has laid hold of me. In other words, it's going to require him pressing on in order to lay hold of what Christ has laid hold of him for. Discipline is what he's referring to. Brethren, I do not count myself to have apprehended, but one thing I do, that's discipline. Some of you are too scattered in too many directions. Something gets your attention, you run over here. Something else gets your attention, some shiny object starts ringing its bell over here, and you run. You can't fixate on one thing. One thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forward to those things which are ahead, I press toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. I press toward the goal. This is all about disciplining yourself, creating an environment where you can excel. A seed has to be planted in a very structured environment, the right environment. I haven't figured that out yet. My seeds didn't grow. They didn't bear fruit. A farmer has to operate within very narrow boundaries of natural law. He has to get up when it's demanded that he get up, which is usually before sunup. He has to go to bed after dark. During the day, there are certain tasks that are appropriate depending on the season and the time that is playing out as far as his crops are concerned. And if he's not willing to discipline himself, he's not going to excel as a farmer. So discipline is an environment that you create. If you're unwilling to discipline your life, you'll never excel. You'll always be mediocre. The second, the best word I could think of is stimulation. You have to do things that stimulate your brain. That means you have to venture outside the comfort zone and allow yourself to be exposed to challenges that you have not yet experienced, or to venture into an arena that you're not yet familiar with. This is how your brain grows, your muscles in your body. If you're overweight or you're out of shape, you have to get into the weight room, get into the gym, ride a bicycle, go running, go walking. You have to begin to stimulate your muscles. You have to do that. It's not going to happen automatically. Your brain needs stimulation. If you're doing the same old, you're not stimulating your brain. And again, as I said in the introduction, your brain is actually a muscle. And as it is exercised in the correct way, your intellectual capacity begins to grow, just like your muscles get strengthened, your fat melts off, you begin to grow in physical ability as you exercise and have a right diet. So too is your brain exercise. A muscle will atrophy if it's not used. We generally use most of our muscles to some degree. We walk. We at least, get the fork and put it into the plate and bring it. We're doing forklifts, someone called those. But then when you go into a gym and you start weightlifting, you get sore. Why? Because you may be using those muscles to a minimal degree, but now you're really using them, and now they're going to get strengthened. And you have to go through some measure of discomfort and pain for that to happen. So this was the nature of Solomon's position. He has to get himself in front of a challenge that he's unfamiliar with and unequipped to handle. So God gives him wisdom. Then these two women come with a complex problem that there's no solution for. If I was faced with that, or you were faced with that, wouldn't know what to do. What do you do? How do you solve this problem? There's no witnesses. One baby died, the other one lived, and this woman whose baby died stole the other baby, claimed it was hers, put the dead baby with the other one, and now they're both cackling in front of Solomon in a cat fight. How do you deal with that? Well, he thought about it. And I think two factors were at work. One is a gifting, but one is his thought processes. Bring me a sword. Let's cut the living baby in half and divide it. No, don't do that, one said. And the other one said, yeah, go ahead and do that, then we'll both be satisfied. And so Solomon knew which one was the mother. See, that's why you have to get involved in things beyond the scope of your experience. This is why ministry is such a good expression. We preached about that last Wednesday night. Serving people, helping, following up. Getting involved in a new convert's life who's struggling with heroin or cocaine or marriage problems, and investing yourself. This is stimulation. This enhances and enlarges your capacity in life when you're faced with complex things that you're not used to dealing with. You learn. Man, I didn't know that. Now I know that. Why? Because you stimulated your brain by putting yourself into a situation where you've never been. One of the best ways of stimulating your brain is to read. One of the tragedies of this generation is people don't read anymore. I can go places through reading that I've never been. You can time travel. Have you ever wanted just to, they have these movies about time machines. You can go back in time. You can go, some people think, man, that would sure be fun. Well, you can do that by reading. If a book is well written, I can go back and walk through President Ulysses S. Grant's whole life from birth until death. I did that last year. I read a great biography. I learned so much. When I finished the book, it's one of those big, thick books. When I finished the book, I kind of felt sad. But I learned so much, not just about his life, but how he handled things, how he dealt with things, and so many things are there. I can go places I've never been. I can travel back to another era, another generation. I can read about people. I can read about their lives. I can read about the experiences of people that are so far removed from mine. I can read what it's like. I can experience all of that through reading. Your brain needs that kind of stimulation or it isn't going to grow. It's not. Observation. Meditative observation. We look at certain things and see certain things and we think about them. I remember I asked George Moreno one time. George Moreno, our pastor in Juarez, has somewhat of a natural engineering mind. And I asked him one time, how did you develop this? He said, well, one thing I did was when I was a little boy, I was interested in how the washing machine worked. So I pulled it away from the wall, took the back off, and I watched how the motor worked, and it fascinated me. And so you see what I'm talking about? It stimulated his mind. And now he obviously thinks about other things besides how washing machines work. But this is how you stimulate. And I'm not going to teach on this now, but we're doing such a disservice when you take your kid and you hand him a device. No parent should be doing that at all. What you should be doing is handing him a book. This doesn't stimulate their brain. This will keep them dumb. We may have the book. I'm not sure if we have the book called The Shallows in our bookstore. It's a fascinating book about a study that was done about how devices actually keep your brain functioning at a very shallow place. People can't focus, can't concentrate anymore. It's point and click and point and click. You read a paragraph or two. If it doesn't capture your interest, you go somewhere else. A book, you read page after page, your brain develops differently. You're able to focus. You're able to concentrate. You're able to learn. You're able to capture deep things that can change you forever. And so what you're doing, you're not going to like this, and you parents may get offended, but I believe handing your child a device is child abuse, now that we know the effect that it has. Keep devices away. Give them books. Teach them how to read. I was quite amazed when my two grandsons were with me a year ago. Right now, they spend a week with my wife and I, Jack and Robbie came. We'd be out doing something. Whenever we get home, they would go straight to the couch, straight into the living room, and grab a book. They never once asked for my device. They never once went to the computer. I have a computer in my house. They never once went to the computer. Papa, can you turn this on? We want to watch. Not one time in the week that they were with me. It was books, and they plowed through, each of them plowed through 3 or 4 books. Now they're in school, high school, and they're excelling. Their brains are being stimulated, not to the level of the shallows. Your children are going to have learning disabilities. I prophesy that. Not because I'm negative, because the research is in. So you ought to change your habits. Deliver your children from devices cold turkey, we call it, like heroin. They're going to kick, they're going to scream, they're going to tell you how much they hate you. They're going to take the book and say, I don't even know how to turn this on. But it'll help them. I'll close with this scripture. Jesus, 12 years old. Remember, he got lost. Parents freaked out. One thought he was with the other. A day passed. They had to go all the way back to Jerusalem. They were probably 10 or 12 walking miles away. They went back, and now it was after 3 days that Joseph and Mary found Jesus in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions. Listening to them, asking them questions, stimulating. And all who heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. We know that he's God. You say, well, yeah, he's God. Well, but he's also a man, and his brain needed to be developed and grow. You may have a hard time contemplating that, but the scripture speaks for itself. He asked them questions. He listened to them. And then he increased in wisdom and stature. His wisdom and stature had to develop as he grew from adolescence into adulthood. So there you have it. There's some examples there of the environment, and some won't do this. They just won't. They'll stay in the 10%, comfortable, don't ever want to read a book, don't like reading, don't want to discipline myself. Fine. You can do that, but I hope some of you get inspired in this arena. We have a moment for a question or two very, very quickly. If anyone has a comment or something to contribute to our discussion today, anybody at all? All right, Sage up here in the front.
Pastor, you were talking about kind of releasing a genius, and I was hearing earlier this week was the first sub 2 hour marathon that this Kenyan ran a sub 2 hour marathon, and I was hearing about what he went through to train for that, and I think it was running like 140 miles a week, so 4 or 5 marathons a week for months in preparation for that one event, and so just hearing how fast he was running and kind of seeing how fast that would look for someone who hadn't prepared for running 13 miles an hour for 26.
Yeah, I think he's a Kenyan guy, and even up to 5, maybe 10 years ago, they were saying it's impossible. The human body is not physiologically constructed to run 26 miles in under 2 hours. Well, this guy said no. Discipline, right? Increase the capacity of his body, and now he's going to be a multi-gazillionaire because he ran the first under 2 hour marathon. That's a great example of the possibilities that are there. That's a physical example, but that can be a good illustration of your mental ability. All right, let's just finish with that because we're just a few minutes from 11. We're going to begin service in a few moments. Lord bless you. We're going to continue this next week. Thank you very much.